Hey, welcome to the second GameMaker tutorial. In the first tutorial, we created this text box that you can type into, and that's all very well and good. We have a cursor. The box is highlighted whenever we click on it, and it stops being highlighted when you click outside of the box. I've created a button here that we're going to click after we type in our name, and that's going to, provide us with some feedback. And depending on the feedback, the submission's either going to be a success or it's going to be a failure. So if I just click this right now, it says the name must be at least 3 characters because I haven't typed anything in here. And if I put, I have this capped at 10 characters, so we're past that limit, including this cursor here, I think. This is more than 3 characters, so it says successful submission, and we play a little sound. Unfortunately, GameMaker is sort of lacking in UI support. So a lot of what you have to do is build these components yourself from scratch. And I'm going to try and help you with some of that. And that's, of course, unless you want to use some external plugin or extension that you download that someone else has written for giving you a UI library. Some of those cost money, but in a lot of cases, I think it should be simpler just to roll something out yourself. Okay, so now we have no submit button or anything of that nature, and we just have our text thing. Yeah, let's go ahead and let's try and create a menu element. And like I said, there's no, official support for this kind of thing. So we're kind of on our own and we're going to want to make our own. And what I do is, since I create a bunch of menu elements in one of the games that I'm programming, I like to have all of that functionality offloaded into a script. And a script in GameMaker is kind of just another file that you make that will hold some functions, and you can kind of reuse those functions throughout your project. And what do we want this script to do? Well, we want it to basically give us a button that we can click in, like that submit button that I showed in the beginning, that can basically respond to user feedback, aka just clicking it. So I'm going to copy in some code that I've already written ahead of time. And like I said, all this is in the description. So you feel free to use this. And we're just going to work through this one by one. But basically, this is just like a doc string here. And it's more or less a description of what this function is going to do. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and name this script to the same thing as what we have there in the doc string, so that there's no confusion there. Let me just hit rename. And we're going to end up using this in our code. And what this is going to provide for us is a button with some text inside of it. And the button's automatically going to wrap around the text to fit it, so that you don't have to worry about, having 2 individual draw calls that draw the text and draw the button. This function's going to do that, and you will just call this function. So that is looking a lot better. And so now I'm also just going to copy in my function header here. And this is how you define a function in GameMaker. You just say function, and then you have all the arguments here. And let me just close it off because we're getting a compiler error. And then, I'm not sure if there's like a more modern way to do this, but what you do is you have your named parameters here. A parameter is just like, it's like a placeholder for something to be passed into a function. We're going to pass in the text that we're going to draw inside the button. We're going to pass in rectangle, which I believe is just a Boolean that tells us whether or not to draw the rectangle. And the coordinates for that rectangle, like where to start the top left corner of the rectangle, what sort of font we want, and given our current font size, if we want to scale that font down. So you can pass in a real number here, which is just like a decimal number. And it will, if you pass in 0.5, it'll shrink the text and the box in half. This center line I'll sort of explain as we go along, but it's basically going to say whether or not we're going to draw the box and the text starting from the left-hand corner, like the left origin, the top left origin of the box and the text, or if we're going to start drawing it in the middle of the box and in the text, and if that's going to be where we sort of place it on the screen. Hopefully that makes sense. It'll become a little bit more clear. And then it's just the color of the button, which is the color of the rectangle that we're going to draw, and the color of the text inside. I'm going to copy in a bit more code here. So this is sort of relating back to what I was just talking about. This will tell us where we're going to be able to draw our, start drawing our box and start drawing the text. So this is just setting the alignment of those things depending on what the user passes in. And then, underneath here, we want to basically set our font to whatever the user passes in. So, and I'll type it out for you. We want to set the font to whatever font we pass into our function, which in this case is just font. And you know what? I think what would be helpful at this point is so that you could kind of see an example of what this is going to look like when it's being called. So let me go to that. At the top here, and this is not related to the definition of this function at all. This is just an example of what this is going to look like when it's called. So again, I kind of mentioned this is going to return whether or not someone clicked inside of this box that we're going to create with the text. And this is the text that we're going to draw. We are going to draw the rectangle. Here's where we're going to start it. And don't worry about this X1, Y1. That's just related to, if this will build. I don't know if the script will fail. So this here is X1 and Y1. That's what this coordinate pair is here. So we were going to draw our submit button, 150 pixels to the right of it and 150 pixels below it, because in GameMaker it starts at 0, 0 at the top and then it's going to increase as you go down. So, and then, we're passing in our box font from the first video, which is a font that we've already set up here that we're going to use for all of our text basically. And that's just a default font. So let me go back to my script. What else is here? We have the scale of the font. In this case, I was just passing in 1 because I just want to draw it at the normal font size of this, which will be a 72-point font. False, meaning that we're not going to center align it. And the color of the button is going to be red and the color of the text is going to be white. Okay, so hopefully that helps a little bit. What I was in the middle of doing before I went off on that tangent was drawing the font. Well, setting up the font. And one of the things that I mentioned that this code does is it's going to sort of draw the box around whatever text we provide. And to do that, we're going to want to get the number, the size of the string that we just drew to the screen. And we can do that by doing this. We're going to get the text to draw, which is something that we passed in, right? That's what we want to draw inside. And width is going to be equal to the string width. This is a built-in GameMaker function, if I can spell correctly. String height, string width, text to draw. And basically this just gave us like the size of the string that we just drew. The next thing we want to do is draw that box. Like I said, draw it around the string that we just drew to the screen. which in our case, it's going to be the submit button. So I'm actually going to copy some code in, and I'll try and explain what this does. So this rectangle here is just a Boolean, so it just tells us to draw the rectangle. And let's take the simple case first, where we're not center aligning the text. In other words, we're starting at the top left corner where we draw our box and where we draw our text. Well, obviously we want to start drawing the rectangle at whatever x we provide and at whatever y. And then we're going to draw the rest of the box. We want the width, which we just got, of the string. And we're going to multiply that times the scale of the font. So if we provided a font scale of 0.5, that would make sure our box is like half of it. And the same thing for the height. We're going to take the height and we're going to multiply it times the font scale, which is the same value for height and width. So we're going to draw it. If it's 0.5 that we provide, we'll draw it halfway. If it's 1, we'll draw it all the way. So all this is doing is giving us a box. And the center align is if we start drawing the text and the box right in the middle. And we're just multiplying those values by 0.5 basically, so that we don't cut off any of the text with our box. We want to fit it perfectly because we're going to start drawing right in the middle. It's a little bit confusing, but that's what this portion does. And we haven't actually drawn the text to the screen yet, so we're going to do that. And we'll type that out together so that we can understand each part of it. So let's do draw text transform color. And we'll pass in our x coordinate. We're not going to use x, which is sort of a built-in x. And what x is it's like whatever game object you're using right now, it's going to get the position of it in the room. We are dealing with UI elements, so we want to define our own. If you look at the room, and this is a bit of a tangent, that's where our object is, but really this is kind of just a placeholder for us to write all of our menu logic. We don't care about where this thing is in space. We don't care about its X or Y. We care about where we want to draw things on the screen. So that's why we're using our own arguments that we pass in. So we're going to use the X coordinate here and the Y coordinate here. And we're going to provide our text to draw as the string. You can see here that it's giving us the function definition for this built-in GameMaker function. The scale of it obviously is going to be the font scale parameter that we provided. So we're kind of taking our arguments from our custom function here and we're routing it into a built-in GameMaker function. 0 is the angle. We don't want it to be rotated at all. And the color is, again, we're routing in our parameters that we've defined for our custom function. So we're going to say color text, and it's a bunch of color options here that it provides, and our alpha is going to be 1. We don't want it to be transparent at all. Okay, so we've drawn the rectangle and we've drawn the text for our submit button. And now what we want to do is determine whether or not basically someone has clicked inside of it, because we're going to be doing that over and over again for any menu element that we write. And it's going to be quite similar to the case of drawing the rectangle, only instead of drawing the rectangle, we're checking if the user has clicked inside of the rectangle. If I didn't mention this, it's going to return a Boolean, which is true or false, and that's going to say whether or not we clicked inside of our rectangle. Let's return clicked, and now we just have to define what clicked is. And we're going to use a built-in GameMaker function called pointInRectangle. And essentially it's going to have the same coordinates as the rectangle that we drew. We're just going to pass an x coordinate, y coordinate, and then again, you know, our size is this, right? It's the size of the text. And it'll be the same for this, right? But we're going to pass in height times font scale. I believe I got that right. Let's put a comma. So we got x1, y1, x2, y2, point in rectangle. Am I missing anything? We also have to give it the value of the mouse pointer in space. So up here it would be 0, 0, and down here it would be, you know, 1920, 1080, which is the resolution. This is a built-in variable that you can use anywhere, sort of like how X and Y were. And, you know, I'm just going to copy in this other portion from the example code, but it's the same as before. But for the center alignment case, where we want to start drawing our text and our box in the middle, it does the same calculation adjustments that we did when we drew the rectangle, so that it knows exactly where you're clicking in and everything works fine. But this statement here, this is exactly what we just wrote. Okay, so we've finally written this huge script, but now we're going to go and actually try and use this. So let's go to our text box. And let's go to, do we want to go to our step event or our draw event? Pretty sure we're going to want to go to the draw event first to call this draw submit button. So we're going to call our function that we just wrote. And if you remember, our function returns a variable, a Boolean, whether or not someone actually clicked inside of this button that we have. So let's look for our thing. So submit is the text that we want to appear inside the button. And x1 is, like I said, the top left corner of our text box, which we have here in the create. Run. So I'm talking about this sort of corner here. This is x1 and y1. Just right here where I'm mousing over. We're gonna add a little bit of space, and likewise we're gonna draw a bit underneath our input box. And then we have to provide the font. So we'll just use font box, which is the one that we used in the first video. 1 is the scale. Center align, we're going to say that's false because we're just going to start drawing our text at the top left, and we're going to start drawing the box at the top left. And I believe we just have 2 more arguments, but this is telling me I have an extra one, so I probably have to go delete something. Color button, let's just make that red. And we'll make the color text white. And let me fix my script. So rectangle needs to be added somewhere. I think it needs to go right here. Okay, there should be 9, including rectangle. So let's go to our draw. We'll call this true. And now it's finally happy with us. So we have drawn the box, we've drawn the text using our helper function, and it's going to tell us whether or not we clicked inside of it. So now let's just draw a string underneath of it. So we're going to use a built-in function here, and these coordinates I've already checked to make sure that they're decent for where we're going to draw that. And validation output we need to define somewhere, but that's basically just going to be the text that shows up that says successful submission, or that the string is too short. So it's pass in validation input 100, and I will show that definition. 2000 is the width, if I'm reading that properly. And we're just scaling it down. So I think our font size 72 is 72. So by providing 0.5 here, it's going to be 36. And we want to provide color here too. So for that, we're just going to make this text red, a very dramatic red. And I'll just copy that. See red, see red, see red. And this last one here is an alpha of 1, meaning we don't want it to be transparent. So let me go to my create method. Validation output equals that. And let's check and see if this runs. Okay, so we've got our box here, and nothing happens. And as you can see down here, the validation output, even though we've told it to draw that here, we're just starting with an empty string here in our create method. And if it's not clear already, the create method's basically just where you put the initial values for all of your data. So we still haven't really written our validation code, and our validation code is basically just going to be whether or not our string is long enough. So let's go to our step method, because we're not drawing anything. So that's kind of where this code belongs. We're just doing logic. And let's just leave a little comment here. We're going to do our input validation now. And we'll just say if clicked, which you may remember is the value that we returned from our helper function in the draw method. And it's just saying that we haven't defined this variable yet. So we'll just do that here. And clicked is going to be false by default because, well, obviously we haven't clicked inside of the submit box yet. And that's all that clicked is telling us, is when the user has actually clicked inside of this box. So if clicked, what do we want to do? We want to check and see whether or not the user gave us a good string. And for that, we can just check the length of the name string. So let's do that. We'll say if string length, and we'll check the name variable, and we'll just make sure that it's, say, greater than or equal to 3 characters. Then we're going to set our validation output, which you may remember is the string that we're drawing underneath, to something nice, because the user gave us a nice name. And it's going to say, in this case, successful submission. And then what do we want to do if they don't do that? Well, we want our validation string to be something not so nice, like, hey, you have to provide a better string for us. And that's the meanest thing I could think of that we could possibly say. Name must be at least 3 characters. So we've checked the length of the name that the user provided, and remember, we got that from the keyboard string in the first video. But that's something that we've already defined here, and we're saying if you've made the name long enough, it's going to submit successfully, and that's when we click. Remember, click is, we're going to get this from this, so that whenever we check for the clicked variable here, it's going to be telling us whether or not we actually clicked inside the box. So let's go here. And you see when we click on it, our name has to be 3 characters. So let's click it now. Okay, and now it's saying it's a successful submission. What I like to do is play like a little audio sound, and I usually generate those with a free sound editing program called BFXR. If you download that off their website, and I'll provide a link to that in the description, and it will provide you with a bunch of different sounds here that you could easily export. You just click export as wave, and then what you do is you create a new sound object. So what we want to do is, let's create 2 sounds, one for when the user has provided a successful submission, and one for when the user has provided a bad submission for their name. So let's go back to BFXR. So let's try and make a happy noise. All right, that's pretty happy. That sounds pretty happy. So let's do that. And we'll just call this one success. And let's just make sure that it's a dot wave. All right, that will be our bad noise. Let's do that. So we'll just call this one fail dot wave. And we've already created a new sound asset here. And I believe the naming convention here is that we start it with sound. And now let's go to our success. We'll open that. Oh, don't want to mute it. So that's our successful submission here. Let's create another sound, and we'll call that one sound fail. And let's go here, fail, open it. Where do we want to call these sounds? Well, we're gonna do it in our step event of our text box, and I guess this technically is getting a little weird because we have more than one object inside of our text box, technically. So this could probably be renamed something like menu screen logic. After the successful submission, we're just going to play a sound, and the built-in function for that is audio play sound. And it takes a bunch of parameters, and not all of them are required. I believe that's what this in these ones in brackets are. These are not required parameters for your function. So you just have to provide the function that the sound that we created, the resource. So we have the success one. The priority, I think we can just put that as 0. I'm not sure that matters because we don't have any overlapping sounds, and we're not going to loop it. So that's what this is, 0. And we'll do the exact same thing here for the bad scenario. So let's do audio play sound, sound fail, 0, 0. Let's check and make sure that this is running. So it's playing our sound for us, saying that you need at least 3 characters. And I put my name as hello, and I get a successful submission. So that's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Again, all of the code for the video is going to be linked up in the description. You can download it, copy it for your own project, and run it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave one in the comments. I'm very active with responding to questions, and I will definitely help you with any issues that you have while running it. Okay, so I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.